The next assignment I'm going to have you do is a 24-hour intake and output record. So this is the sheet that you should have. You should have gotten one of these before we left. So it says assignment sheet number 2. And then we have a whole bunch of different measurements down here. Sorry, this should have 2 pages like this with all of your measurements on them. And then you also should have your record sheet. You are going to want to rip these papers away from each other. I know they're all stapled together, but rip them away so you can look at it and record at the same time you are looking at this content. So the first thing we need to do is we're going to read the introduction here and figure out what's going on with our patient. So it says right up here, introduction, Mr. Fred Way is a patient who has had bowel surgery. A catheter is in place for urine. His urinary output is measured every hour. He has an IV in place. He's allowed ice chips and ginger ale in small sips, otherwise he is NPO. A nasogastric tube is in place to drain the stomach contents. It is connected to a suction machine and drained into a jar. At times the tube is irrigated or flushed so it will not clog. Mr. Way is under the care of Dr. Pease and he is in room 2851. So one nice thing about this assignment sheet, and most places will have a conversion sheet, is it has all of the conversions right here. So remember again, we are doing this in milliliters. All of your measurements right here are in cc's, but 1 cc equals 1 milliliter. So if I needed to do a glass of juice, we know that that's 120 milliliters worth of fluid. Then we're going to come down and we're going to go to number 1 here, and we're going to have urine measured hourly. So every hour, the doctor said, I want you to empty out that catheter. This can be done for a lot of different reasons. It can just be done by looking and seeing, okay, are they putting out the amount that they should be every hour? And I don't want to wait for a whole 8 hours to figure out that they are not doing that, or wait for 2 hours even. I want to see what every single hour is to make sure that their kidneys are producing the urine. So we've got all these measurements here, starting at 7 a.m. and going all the way till 6 a.m. the next morning. Then we also have the NG tube was irrigated with normal saline. Irrigated again means that the NG tube was flushed. So we are putting fluid in through the NG tube to clear out the tube, which means that this is going to be put under intake. On the next sheet, we have the NG tube drainage is measured, which means that it's coming out of the body. So everything under this category is going to be under output. The IV intake is recorded, so that will go under intake. Intake of ice cube chips is going to be under intake. Ginger ale, intake, and also vomited will be under output. So let's look at our sheet first. We've got some information on the patient, so we're going to go ahead and fill that out first, making sure we are always documenting who we are recording information on. Documentation is extremely important. So up at the top here it says family name, and what I've done here is I've taken this section right here and I've made it nice and big for you up on this board so you can see well what I am doing. So the patient's name was Fred Way. So under family name, that means family name is just another name or another way of saying last name. So we're going to go ahead and put Way here, and his first name is Fred. His attending physician, it says it is Dr. Pease. And he is in room 2851. And then it does not give us a hospital ID number. If it did, then we would put that up there also. A lot of times these have stickers with all of the patient's information on there where you don't even have to write it in, or it's on an electronic medical record where you just add things in. All right, so looking at this sheet, we've got first shift only. We've got 7A to 3 p.m. right down over here, and then the 8-hour total, and then it starts over and does the second shift. So we've got our date up here. We're going to go ahead and put today's date, whatever date that you did this, if you can please put the date in that box. And then we've got intake and everything that goes under intake, output and everything that fits under there. We've got an other category because sometimes we have a lot of different things, like a lot of different drains and tubes coming out of the body, so we need more area that we can write in there. And then we also have a remarks section, which is actually very, very important for you to fill in. So we'll go over that in a minute. So the first thing we need to do is we've got the urine is measured hourly. So at 7 a.m., we have 30 milliliters of urine that has come out of there. So looking at these times, they look a little funny. We've got 7 to 8 a.m., which means in between 7 o'clock and 8 o'clock, that's where that measurement would be. So this first one, when it says 7 a.m., just pretend that this 8 o'clock is not in there. This is 7 a.m., this is 8 a.m., this is 9 a.m., and so on and so forth, okay? Another way of thinking about it is if you do 7 to 7:59 instead of this 8, then it's a little bit more clear on where you're supposed to put things. So under 7 a.m., we had a urine output, and I'm getting this right off my sheet, of 30 cc's. So under this category, we're going to come over here, and we had a urine output. It does not say anything about the person has a catheter, but it doesn't say anything about a certain tube over here. So we're going to just put it right under urine. I know last time we put it under void, but that's because we had different options. So we're going to go ahead and put 30 up here. Again, everything is going to be in milliliters, so we do not need to label on this big chart how many milliliters it is. At 8 a.m., we're going to have 40. So under 8 a.m., we have 40. When you're going through this, it's very beneficial for you if you were to just mark them off as you go when you are recording these things. It's very easy to kind of lose your place or skip over some. So you would go through, and all of those are going to be down there, okay? Let me just point out a little section on here because you'll be able to fill this out pretty easily. You see on 12 o'clock midnight, first of all, 12 o'clock midnight is going to be on which shift? It would be considered third shift because third shift is 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. Okay, so midnight, and then it says none. If I were to leave that blank, say it said, for just sake of argument, at 9 o'clock instead of 25 cc's here, it said none. Instead of leaving the 9 o'clock one blank like this, we're going to put a 0 in there. Now remember, this is just showing you how to do it on the chart. This is going to be for midnight when you get to it. The reason I put a 0 here instead of leaving it blank is it looks like we didn't do our job. We didn't check it every hour like we were supposed to. If we put 0 there, that's the measurement that was there when we checked it. So it's just a matter of covering our rear ends a little bit and making sure that we are showing that we are doing the job that we were asked to do. So this one, then you're just going to go through and continue going through and marking all of those down on your sheet, going first shift, second shift, and third shift. Let's go down to the NG tube. The NG tube is irrigated with normal saline. Now we already talked about how irrigation means it was flushed out, and we've got the NG tube. This is going to be intake because we are flushing. We are pushing something through the tube. So at 7 a.m., this is going to be under intake, and we need to put it under NG tube. So we've got a 7 a.m. right here, and we've got 20 cc's, but we don't have an NG tube in here. So we're going to add it in here. It's not already in one of our categories, so we're going to write NG. Now I can add in my measurement now that I know where I'm going to put all of those. And at 7 a.m. we had 20 milliliters. Okay. Then I'm going down to noon. I'm coming down over here, and it goes to 12 o'clock. I know this one says noon, but remember this would really be 11 or 11:59. As soon as you see noon, you're going to start over on this side. So 12 o'clock, noon, is going to be 30. So all of these here are going to be blank until I get to my 12, and I'm going to come across here and I'm going to put my measurement of 30 of intake, and so on and so forth. Okay? Then we're going to go ahead and go on to the next section. I've got the NG tube drainage is measured. So drainage means it's coming out. So all of these measurements are going to go under output. So we've got at 2 o'clock p.m., we've got 750 cc's of greenish stuff that is coming out of the NG tube. And that's obviously going to be liquid because that's what all intake and output is a liquid. So at 2 p.m., we're going to come down over here, 2 p.m. Notice how it says 2:23. Now the reason you don't have a 3 o'clock here is because 3 o'clock starts over on second shift. So that is going to be then into the second shift totals. We are just working first shift, so we need to have our 8-hour totals here. So it's till 3 o'clock, but it says 2 o'clock on there. Okay, so you have to empty all of your big tubes, like you have to empty all of your catheter bags, and you have to empty all of your drains, and you have to empty all of your NG tubes. You have to do all of that to get all of your totals for your shift. You have to do that at the end of your shift so you can have an accurate total. So under the 2 o'clock, we're going to come across, and this is going to be the drainage. So we're going to have 750, and we need to have NG drainage. So we've got urine, tube, emesis, feces, and we've got a blank area over here. Because it already has tube here and that one has not been labeled, I'm just going to make that the NG tube. So I can just write NG right up on the top there, and now it is the NG tube area. So under 2 o'clock, under NG tube, I'm going to write 750. Now, because it has some kind of a descriptor to it, it's given me more information that the doctor may need to know. I'm going to have to make a note. In those notes, it's going to be under remarks over here. So coming across, so you're on the same line at 2 p.m., you're going to write NG greenish. Greenish what? It's a greenish liquid, but everything on the sheet is a liquid. So it doesn't matter if you put liquid on there or not. Then you're going to have another one for second shift at the 10 p.m. section. And then you're going to have another one for third shift at the 6 a.m. And notice they have different ones on here. So the next NG one is also greenish. So you're going to still have to make a note when you are putting this 10 p.m. one in there. And then we also have another one, but now it's golden. Different colors mean different things. So it could mean that the person is getting better, could mean that the person is getting worse. It gives the doctor a lot of information when we label what it actually looks like. So make sure you're making a note for each one of these, please. All right, then we're going on to the IV intake recorded. Just like the NG tube drainage was recorded at the end of our shift, we also have to record how much fluid through the IV went in per shift. So under this, we have 2 p.m. and we had 1,000 milliliters. So under our 2 p.m. section, IVs are always intake. So underneath here, we're going to put 1,000. And then you would do the same thing for 10 p.m. and you do the same thing for 6 a.m. Under intake in ice chips. So we've got ice cubes here, but it actually tells us what they equal. So we've got 1 ice cube equals 5 cc's. So when we look under 7 a.m., we've got 2 ice cubes. If one of them is worth 5 cc's, then 2 of them are going to be worth 10 cc's. So under 7 a.m., we're going to put 10 cc's for the 2 ice chips that we had. So under intake at 7 a.m., we would take those orally, right? They'd go by mouth, and we would write a 10 here. And you would do that for every one. So let's do the next one together also. We've got the 9 a.m. one. We only have 1 ice cube. So we find our 9 a.m. So now we're going to have 1 ice cube, which is worth 5 milliliters. All right, then we have the next section, number 6. That is going to be your ginger ale. We've got small sips. What it's saying is a small sip is worth 1 tablespoon. It's nice that they put those things on here. So 1 tablespoon, though, we don't know how many cc's it is unless we look at our little conversion sheet here. So it says 1 tablespoon. So we're going to go under tablespoons here. And for every one of those little sips of ginger ale, we're going to put 15 milliliters in. So let's look at our time frames. We've got 8 a.m., I'm going to come up here and I'm going to put 15. Our next reading is going to be at 11 o'clock. I'm going to put 15. And 1 o'clock, I'm also going to put 15. And then I would continue to go through the second shift and third shift also. All right, so you guys can follow along and you can do all of those on your own. I'm just trying to show you where you're going to put these things. All right, then we have the number 7 here. We've got vomited, and the person vomited clear liquid. So, and that was at 1 o'clock p.m. So we are going to go up to 1 o'clock. Vomit is output, and it's going to go under emesis. So we're going to come over to emesis, and we're going to put 100. And then it gave us a descriptor. It said it was clear liquid. So we need to make another note. We're going to put another remark over here. So I'm going to write emesis clear. Now I've had my descriptor on here so the doctor has more information. So once you get all of this recorded, so every one of these, go through and mark them off as you go, finish them all up, and now you're going to have a chart that has a lot of different numbers on them. What we're going to do next is we are going to add up all of our first shift totals, our second shift totals, and our third shift totals. So right now I have the 8-hour total down here for the first shift. I've got that all on here, so I'm going to just demonstrate how you would actually go through and do this. So we have got 15, 15, 15, which is going to be 45, plus another 5 is 50, plus another 10 is 60. So I'm going to put my 8-hour total is 60. Now thinking about that for a second, that's not a lot of fluid intake, is it? We had, when we were reading our little introduction where it was telling about our patient, it said that the person was only allowed ice chips and sips of ginger ale, otherwise they were NPO. So it makes perfect sense that we don't have a lot of oral intake. But we know how important intake is. We have to have our intake be the same amount, or hopefully the same amount as our output. Okay, those should be fluid balanced. They should be the same or really close to the same. So to make up for the fluid that we are not taking in orally, the person has an IV and they've had 1,000 milliliters of fluid through the IV. That's still considered intake. That's still getting fluid into the body. So we're going to write 1,000 down. If I had other things written here, I would add those up and put them at my 8-hour total. I have 0 blood, so the person did not get a blood transfusion, so I'm going to go ahead and put a 0 there. And then we had the NG tube. What was actually flushed? The NG tube was flushed quite a few times here, and so we're going to add that up, and that's going to be 50 milliliters of fluid. Now your urine total here, you would have a reading for every single one of these, and I did, to save time, I did not put that in there. So you would add up all of that total as well, and then we're going to do the NG tube total and the MSS total, and then we did not have any feces, so we would put a 0 here. Now some of you are wondering why we have this other category over here. There's a lot of times where we need more output options. We could have a person who has had an abdominal surgery and they have 4 different drains coming out of their body that need to be emptied at the end of each shift. And each one of those drains has to have it measured their own output. So I could put drain number 1, drain number 2, drain number 3, drain number 4 here, and then that's where I would record each one of those drains. That's still considered output. Okay, so now that I have all of my 8-hour totals, or almost all of my 8-hour totals, then I would go down to the next shift. At this time, once you get through all of your readings here, this whole chart is going to be filled out. So then you're going to take this sheet and you're going to start from 3 o'clock and add up all of your totals until 11 o'clock, and here's another 8-hour total. So please do not add in everything that you had for your first shift. You're going to start here and add everything just for second shift and fill in your 8-hour totals here. Do the same thing with third shift. Start here and add up all of your totals to get all of your third shift totals. Then when we're doing our 24-hour total, which is down at the bottom here, you are going to add your 8-hour totals from first shift, 8-hour total from second shift, an 8-hour total from third shift, and you're going to put that under the 24-hour total for oral intake. Then we're going to do the same thing with the IV totals, same thing with the blood totals, same thing with the NG tube totals, and so on and so forth. Once you get all of those totals down from these 8 hours for the shift, the 24-hour ones, now you need to take a cumulative. All of these things right here, the oral, IV, blood, and NG tube, all of that are considered to be intake. So we need to add all 4 of these numbers up when you get your total, and that's going to be your total intake. Same thing with all of these added up, your 24-hour totals, you're going to add all of those up to get your total amount of output. Then what I'd like you to do is just look at those numbers. I want you to look at it and think about it. If the intake is more than the output, what does that mean that's going on in the body? If the output is more than the intake, what is going on in the body? Or do they have fluid balance? We're always looking for fluid balance. But what is going on if we do not have fluid balance? All right, as always, if you have questions, please let me know. You can either scan these or you can take pictures and you can turn them in on Google Classroom.